Hey everyone, looks like we have everybody on the call. Want to thank you guys for joining today's webinar here at ProSpot for our PR-5 Riveting 101 web training webinar. During the call today, hopefully we cover all the questions that you guys have in the riveting process and about the PR-5 itself. But if there's any questions that you guys have, please make a mental note or write them down as we go through the presentation. And at the end, we will give you directions on where to submit those questions so that we can make sure we get everything answered and get you guys the answers that you're looking for, whether it's during the webinar right now live or whether you get a response back from us at the end. So my name is Ryan Swanson, and I'm the Training and Development Manager here at ProSpot International. I've been here for a little over 3 years now, and I've also been an ICAR instructor coming up on 10 years. Just like many of you on the call, I know I have a great mix today of distributors, end users, shop managers, owners, and even MSOs with quality trainers and technical coaches. So, just like a lot of you, I spent most of my career inside of a shop, but I also saw the technology changing and the way the vehicle repairs were going when I had my boots on the ground floor inside of the shop. So what that did for me was made me start training myself, asking questions, and really seeing that we have a big training lapse in the industry, and we need to do something about that. So that's why I left the shop and came to ProSpot, so that we can help make your lives better and help not only the technicians, but MSOs, our distributors, salespeople, service people, anybody out there working in the collision industry to help make our industry better is going to be a big plus for all of us. So thank you everybody for joining the call, and hopefully we get through everything and answer a lot of your guys' questions today. During the next 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to give you guys a nice high-level view about the riveting process and then going into depth about the ProSpot riveter in general. Although we could talk for days about riveting and the processes that go along with it, during the 30 to 45 minutes, like I said, we're going to go from a high level, so keep that in mind. And then once again, write down any of those questions that you have so that you can send those in to us and I can answer maybe some of the in-depth ones that we don't quite get to. So today we're going to go through an overview of the riveting process and why we're here today and talking about riveting in general. We're going to look at the old and the new versions of our ProSpot PR-5 Rivet Gun and possible upgrades that are accessible to you guys out there in the field, including a Henrob update that we're going to talk about. We're going to go over the ProSpot PR-5 and all the optional accessories that are possible to purchase to help make repairs easier and also help meet the OEM requirements that are out there. We're going to take a look at the Tesla kit and the Ford kit, highlighting some of the main dies used and processes that are used with the die sets, and give you some specific examples to help paint a picture for you. We're going to look at the die combo procedures from Tesla and Ford so that you can get a good visual of what the technicians are dealing with every day in the field. We're going to give you an example of a self-piercing rivet, flow form, solid, and blind rivet, so you can see those being installed in action. And we're going to cut to a live part so that you can actually see all those above rivets installed in action, showing you how to properly remove rivets to avoid die breakage, which is going to be a big point of the webinar, is to make sure that you're able to remove the rivets without breaking the die. We're going to show you how to install the blind rivet adapter and use the blind rivet adapter. And then also one of the most popular questions that comes into ProSpot is how to install the large 240 millimeter arm for the rivet gun itself. So to paint a picture for everybody about the riveting process, technology is changing and so are the materials used in today's modern vehicle. With most modern vehicles, OEMs use a mixed material platform. However, no OEM uses the same platform. Tesla and Ford, they're not the same. GM and Ford and Tesla and Chrysler, none of those models or platforms are the same. You guys can see a good example that I put here on a Tesla Model 3. They use multiple different steel strengths, but they also use aluminum in their structure. So with this, we have to be able to find a way to attach the aluminum to the steel and properly join those for a safe repair. Joining these mixed materials and heat-sensitive steels needs to be done in a way that will not take away from the integrity of the material itself. So when we're talking about ultra high-strength steels, and aluminum, a lot of those are heat-sensitive, and it matters if you heat these materials up too much or use the wrong process. So due to the changing vehicle material makeups and platform, what issues are we facing in the collision repair industry on a daily basis? Whether you're a technical coach, whether you're a technician, or whether you're a distributor who's out there making the sale of the equipment. Well, one thing is I'm sure everybody's asked the question themselves or had the question asked to them, is spot welding aluminum feasible in a collision repair setting? And the answer is right there, no. Spot welding aluminum, there is technology out there in some factory type scenarios, but in a collision shop with our power that's available to us, spot welding aluminum is not something that's feasible in our setting. Ultra high strength steel and high strength steels are heat sensitive. So welding these heat sensitive materials in certain scenarios may cause weakening of the part themselves. That's why we're starting to see other repair methods such as riveting that we're going to talk about, or MIG brazing, for example. What do we now do about attaching aluminum to steel? So as we see these new vehicle platforms coming out from the different OEMs, what do we do on the collision side to be able to properly attach in a safe manner these different materials? And then above that, what training would be involved for the average technician? Once again, with these changing vehicle platforms, no longer can a technician say, well, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I know how to do it. The reality is these cars are changing so fast, and just because you've done it a certain way in the past does not mean that it's the correct way to do it currently. So with all these problems, what is a great solution? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Riveting or rivet bonding, which typically go hand in hand. So rivet with adhesives. So why is rivet bonding a great solution? Well, first of all, there's no heat involved when using rivets and adhesive. So we just talked about the heat sensitive materials that we're working on nowadays and how repairing them or joining those materials in the wrong way can have an adverse effect and make the repair not safe for the consumer to get back in the car and drive down the road. So if we use rivets and adhesive, we don't have to worry about heat or ruining that integrity of that material. It's extremely easy to train a technician how to use a rivet gun and spread glue. If a technician has a trouble seeing or does not have a steady hand, it's hard to teach a technician how to properly MIG weld or mag weld or MIG weld aluminum. They may not be able to get that skill down simply because of their eyesight or their ability to have a steady hand. Well, not quite the same on the other end for riveting. If your eyesight isn't quite there, or you don't quite have a steady hand, you should still be able to pull a trigger on a rivet gun and line up the dies and read your directions to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So with that being said, it's extremely to train the technician and you get repeatable results. A technician can learn how to do it and get repeatable results, repair after repair. The technology of rivets and riveting systems, such as the ProSpot PR-5 and modern adhesives that are on the market, make this an easy choice for OEMs. So not only do we get repeatable results, it's easy to train, but the technology is there to back it, that it is strong enough to be able to make a safe and proper repair. So that's why they're starting to go in this direction. So now that we have a good overview of why riveting is becoming more popular and it's not going to go away, as these vehicle manufacturers are coming up with these different platforms and trying to make these cars lighter weight for better fuel efficiency, the riveting process and adhesive bonding process is not going to go away. So we're going to start talking about the ProSpot PR-5. So as you guys can see up here, we have the old version and the current version. If you have the old version pictured there on the right, you can visit our website, go to the products tab and look up the PR-5 upgrade form. You can fill out that form and you can get this rivet gun actually sent back to us here at the factory at ProSpot. We will do some work to the insides and the outsides and upgrade that gun so that when you get it back, you now have what's called the current version and you have the availability to use our newer and improved dies. And you also have the availability to use our additional attachments, which we're going to cover, like the blind rivet adapter and the deeper arms. One more upgrade that we're excited about here at ProSpot to talk about is the Henrob conversion kit. So many of you may have customers that have a Henrob kit sitting in their store, Or you are a technical trainer and one of the locations that you're responsible for has a hen rob gun sitting there. The hen rob gun technology is very similar to the Pro Spot, and our engineers went to work and were able to come up with a conversion kit that you're able to purchase from us that will take your hen rob gun and convert it to a Pro Spot style gun so that you get the availability to use the newer and improved dies. You can use all of Pro Spot dies for that matter. You get the availability to purchase the larger extension arms and the blind rivet adapter. There's a few areas on the F-150 that the hen rob gun is very difficult to get into, such as the upper rail on the F-150 bedside. So converting it to a Pro Spot gun gives you a better chance at being able to get to those areas and complete those repairs properly. So now that we talked about the old and the new version, up here on the screen, you can see I have the Pro Spot PR-5 Rivet Gun as the current version as it is right now when you either get it upgraded or when you purchase it brand new from us. So you guys can see there, starting up at the top, you have the pressure knob. The pressure knob is very important to make sure that you have it set right for the different processes. We're going to take a look at some examples later on in the webinar that go over some of the pressure, but for you guys, as you can see it in the picture there is no thread sticking out of the pressure knob. So this is the lightest pressure that the gun will produce, which is 20 kilonewtons. As you tighten it down and the threads start sticking out, each additional thread is going to be 10 additional kilonewtons of pressure. So you're going to start at 20 and go all the way up to 50 kilonewtons of pressure with it tightened all the way down and all 4 of the threads sticking out. There's a battery indicator light, so if the battery dies, that light will turn red and it will not allow you to set a rivet. It's important to keep in mind that the battery power does not dictate the setting or the pressure of the rivet. If the battery does not have enough power, it will abort the rivet process and won't even attempt to do the rivet. So if the rivet sets, you can be assured that the battery was charged and it set it to the pressure that the gun was set for. There's a retract button and also the forward trigger motion. So obviously one for setting the rivet in motion, and then the retract button is used for a couple different things that we're going to talk about moving forward. When you activate the trigger button, you also get a light that comes on the front. So just like a lot of your cordless drills at home, it's the same idea. So that if you're in a dark crevice, you're able to see, you get a little bit extra light in there for you. The battery itself, 18-volt rechargeable battery. They are replaceable. So if you have a battery go bad, you can contact us and we can replace that battery for you. You can see there on the right, we have a couple of our optional accessories. So the PRR-120, which is the 120 millimeter deeper reach arm. And then our biggest arm, which is the PRR-240 or 240 millimeter arm. And then finally, the blind rivet adapter, which is the PA-P20 blind rivet adapter. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we move forward as well. Now that we talked about the gun, the next 2 important things about your Pro Spot PR-5 Rivet Gun are the 2 different die kits. Okay, when you purchase a PR-5 Rivet Gun from us, it's going to come with either the Ford kit or the standard kit, whatever you'd like to call it, and then also the Tesla kit. So if you're working on both of these vehicles at your center or collision repair shop, you're going to need to have both kits and purchase the additional kit so that you have all the dies. There are a lot of different dies between the 2 kits, although some of them do cross over, like the removal die. But Tesla, for example, uses flow form rivets where Ford does not use any flow form rivets. So for this example, if you see in the Tesla kit, there are a couple flow form rivet dies that are not included in the Ford kit. You can also see along the top row, Tesla uses 7 or 8 different SPR backside or form side dies that they will actually dictate in their repair procedures. And we're going to show you an example of that moving up. But that is a lot different from Ford, where they only offer 2 different form side dies. You know, once again, opposed to Tesla, who's 7 or 8 different dies for just that. So we want to go into a Ford and Tesla procedure example. We get a lot of phone calls coming into Pro Spot, you know, whether it's a distributor or once again, an actual technician who's trying to work and get a repair done or a replacement panel done. And they're asking, you know, what die combos do I use? What kind of rivet do I use on this repair or this replacement? So I wanted to bring a couple of examples up here to show you that if the technician has access to the repair procedures and the technician knows how to read the repair procedures, it should be pretty easy for them to take a look at the page, look at the chart. You can see the Ford example is the first one there on the left. It gives you a nice picture with actual numbers pointed to the different rivet locations. And then if you look down, I took just a snippet. Obviously, this isn't the whole page, but it gives you a nice little snippet showing you what the self-piercing part number is from Ford. And then it gives you the Henrob and the ProSpot actual die number that you use out of our die kit. So for this example, for the self-piercing rivets, you're going to use 0400 with an 0401. So they map it out pretty easily. So the question really should never come up of which die do I use, because if you're looking at the procedures, it's right there. And then we take a look at the other side of the screen. We have our Tesla example. So on the top, I used a flow form rivet example because once again, Tesla uses a lot of flow forms that Ford does not use. So up at the top, you can see it gives you the flow form rivet size along with the part number for Tesla. And then it gives you the three tools. So the Express 800, the TKR Rivet Gun, and then the ProSpot PR-5. It will give you the actual die combination and the installation pressure, which you can see on ours is 50 kilonewtons. So that's going to be basically max pressure for our PR-5 Rivet Gun. And then you can see the chart right underneath that, which is the Tesla version of the self-piercing rivet chart. So that will give you the Boloff and the ProSpot part numbers as they coincide according to the repair procedures. So if they have the repair procedures, which they all should in hand in front of them, there should be no question as to which rivet combination set or which rivet I use. It's all mapped out right here. I wanted to give you guys one more quick tip for the die combination sets. As we just went over, your repair procedures are going to be pretty in-depth about which die combination set to use, but there's one more variable, and that's whether the extension that you can see there on the upper right-hand part of your screen, where it says PRR-EXT-25, that is a 25 millimeter extension, and in some scenarios it's needed, and some die combinations it's not needed. So an easy way to look at it is if you have a small or short combo, like the pictures here to the left, which is an SPR or flattening die combo set, you need an extension. If you do not have an extension on here, the rivet gun will not be able to reach maximum pressure, and you will not get the results that you're looking for. So a common question that may come in is someone saying that it seems like my rivet gun's not reaching pressure. And then we ask them what die combination they're using. We find out they're trying to install, let's say, an SPR, for example, but they do not have the EXT-25 on it. If you try to do that in this scenario, the rivet gun will actuate, but it will not reach pressure, and the rivet will not set properly. And then we go to the other side of it. If you have a large or a long die combination set, like the removal, like the 10 and the 11 HD that you see below, there's no extension needed because the longer die combo makes up for the lack of travel that you're missing from the install dies that we just talked about. So comes down to short die set will need an extension, long die set does not need the extension. The last thing that we want to get into before we actually go to the live part of this webinar and show you the PR-5 in action and set some rivets, it's very important to understand the different types of rivets that we see in a collision repair setting. Many distributors, technicians, and quality coaches may not understand what the difference is. And some of these rivets, as you can see from a quick glance at the picture, they can get mixed up and maybe even confuse one for the other. So the first one that you have there on the screen is the self-piercing rivet, or an SPR. A self-piercing rivet does not require a pre-made hole, and it is always installed in conjunction with adhesive. Okay, you should never be doing an SPR without adhesive in between. I don't know of a single OEM procedure that would dictate that. The rivet, an SPR, is set with squeeze pressure and will not penetrate through the backside of the panel. It has a hollow center with a cutting angle, as you can see there in the picture. Moving on to the next rivet, which is a flow form rivet. As you can see, it looks very similar to a self-piercing or an SPR style rivet, but it requires a pre-made hole for installation as opposed to no pre-made hole. This rivet is also set with squeeze pressure, just like the SPR. It also has a hollow center, but it does not have the cutting angle that the SPR does. I think you guys can see a pretty good visual of that right there on your screen. Next, we have a solid rivet. Many OEMs use solid rivets, such as Ford and Audi. A solid rivet requires a hole for installation, just like the flow form rivet that we just talked about. This rivet, just like the flow form and the SPR, is also set with squeeze pressure, but the center is solid, unlike the flow form or the self-piercing rivet. The last rivet that we're going to talk about is a blind rivet. For the example there, that is one of the most popular Tesla blind rivets. The Ford blind rivet looks pretty similar, but with a little shorter base. And blind rivets can vary in size and shape, so it's important to know that not just any blind rivet is okay. Once again, take a look at those repair procedures and make sure that you're using the correct part number. A blind rivet also requires a pre-made hole, just like a solid rivet and a flow form rivet, but it requires a pulling force as opposed to a squeeze force, which we're going to take a look at in the live part of the webinar. Once again, the design and look may vary, so make sure to follow your procedures and make sure you're using the correct part number and the correct blind rivet for that specific repair. Now that we have a better understanding of the PR-5 and the riveting process in general, let's take a look at the PR-5 in action. We're going to skip over to a live cam here, and we're going to go over some specifics on the rivet gun itself, showing you how to install an SPR, going through the removal process as a technician would. So going from removing that SPR and then how we're going to prep it to get it ready for the replacement rivet, whatever that may be. We're going to go in depth using the PRR-10HD, which is the removal die, making sure that you guys have all the tips and tricks to not break this die during use. We're going to install the blind rivet adapter and pull a blind rivet to show you how that works and some of the advantages with that. And then we're going to install the 240 large arm and show you how to make sure that everything's aligned and working properly.
Now that we have a better understanding of the riveting process and ProSpot's PR-5 riveter in general, and also why riveting is becoming more and more popular in today's collision repair industry, let's take a look at ProSpot's PR-5 in action. Everything from showing you how to set a rivet, remove a rivet, and get it ready for the next rivet installation according to the repair procedure. We'll show you each step of the way, the different die combinations, and then go into more detail on how to install the blind rivet adapter and the larger arm. All right, you guys can see that I have a mock rocker panel set up here. This is a 3-layer with 2.5 millimeters in between, and the top layer being a 1 millimeter, which is very similar to a Ford cab or Ford rocker panel type setup. So what we want to do here is go through the riveting process as far as installing a self-piercing rivet to show you how that works, and then go through the rest of the riveting process as far as removing the rivet, flattening the area out after the removal process, and then calibrating the hole so that we can reinstall the rivet according to the repair procedures. Once you remove an SPR, your repair procedures are typically going to tell you to calibrate the hole and replace it with either a solid rivet, a flow form rivet, or a different style blind type rivet. There are many different rivets that OEMs use, so it's very important to take a look at the repair procedures and make sure that you're calibrating the hole and doing the right process according to the procedure. So the first thing that we're going to do is grab the PR-5 and we're going to install a self-piercing rivet. So right now on the gun, I have the 0401 for the forming side and I have the 399 for the head side. I'm going to take a 5 millimeter head for a self-piercing rivet, install it into the gun where it has the magnet so it makes it nice and easy, holds onto the gun. And then I'm going to hold the trigger and let the gun complete the process on its own. Once the process is complete, the gun will release on its own, and now the rivet is set. You guys can see that the head is nice and flat, and it has a nice form side on the back that does not pierce through the material itself. Now that we have the rivet installed, we'll move on to the removal process. I want to show you guys a couple things on the removal dies so that you can get an idea of how they work. This is going to be the male end of the removal die that meets up to the forming side on the back of the panel. There's a little indentation on the die itself that fits perfectly around the form side or the bubble on the back of the rivet. Then on the front side, we have the female end, and you can see the little window. The window is actually built there so that you can see the rivet pop out and stop with the trigger right when the rivet pops out so that you don't over compact it and break the die itself. This is a big help to make sure that you feather it properly to remove the rivet. Okay, with both of those dies set up on the gun, you can see that I'm going to take the male side and I'm going to put it right in that little dimple that we just talked about. And then you can see that I have the window is facing me so that I'm able to see the rivet pop out. I'm going to feather the trigger. I'm not going to hold the trigger all the way down. So feather the trigger until the rivet pops out. Once you see the rivets popped out, you're going to press the release trigger. And you can see that the rivet is removed. So from here, we're going to go ahead and use our flattening dies to flatten the area that we just removed the rivet from. Once the area is flat, we'll be prepped and ready to do the calibration. So now on the rivet gun, I'm using the PR-14 and the well, they're both PR-14s because they're both flattening dies. So it obviously doesn't matter which side goes on which. We want to line it up directly over the center of the hole, and I'm going to squeeze the trigger down until the process is completed. Once the process is completed, you guys can see on the top and the bottom, the material or the workpiece is nice and flat. The only thing that I would recommend is to take a look at the pressure setting on the gun. When we're installing an SPR or pulling a blind rivet, we want to have this tightened all the way to give us our max force or max pulling pressure. When we're doing a flattening situation, we may want to back off on the pressure just a little bit so that we don't over warp the metal. This can depend on how thick the material is. So as you guys can see, we have a pretty thick stack up here and it really didn't warp too much. So the pressure was okay on this one. Now we need to get the hole calibrated. So I have the rivet gun set up with the CD8 female end and the CM8, which is the male end. We also need to add the 8mm punch ring onto the male end as so. Once we have that set up, we're going to go ahead and calibrate the hole. I want to line it up right in the center, and I'm going to squeeze the trigger to complete the process. You'll hear it break through, hit the release button, and now you can see that I have a nice, perfect calibrated 8mm hole that's ready to accept my next rivet. Like we said, for the purpose of this, we're going to be installing an 8mm Tesla flow form rivet, but your repair procedures could dictate a style of a blind rivet, a solid rivet, or maybe they actually use another SPR right next to the existing hole. So for this situation, we're going to take our Tesla flow form rivet. We're going to set that into the calibrated hole. I now have my rivet gun set up with my flow form dies, which is the FF8-1 for the head side and the FF8-2 for the bottom side. For this situation, I'm going to line it up as so with the head side on the rivet die, and I'm going to complete the process just like I did at the beginning with the SPR. Once the process is complete, the rivet gun will release on its own, and now the rivet is set and formed nicely on the backside. Now that we have a better understanding of how the rivet process works as far as setting a rivet, using the removal tool, using the flattening dies, the calibration punch, and getting the hole ready for the new rivet that we're going to install, let's take a closer look at how to properly remove a rivet and also talk about a couple key points. A lot of guys in the collision repair industry will use a belt sander when they're going to grind off their rivets. One thing to keep in mind is we want to be careful of galvanic corrosion, which is steel mixing with aluminum. The rivets that are installed, the self-piercing rivets, are made of an ultra-high strength steel or a boron steel. And those are directly inputted into an aluminum panel. So when we use a belt sander, we're grinding off the steel shavings and embedding them directly into the aluminum panel. So we want to avoid a belt sander at all costs and do everything that we can to use the correct removal tool. So let's take a look at a couple different tricks that we can use on the PR-5 rivet removal tool to make sure that you get good proper removals without breaking your die. One thing that we didn't look at the beginning when I went over the removal die was the surface area on the female end of the removal die. You can see that it's an oval shape. In one direction, it's much longer than if I turn it sideways. So depending upon how big your flange area is, you might not have enough room for the surface area to reach with it being in an oval shape. So in this area, we would turn it sideways, and that would give you enough area so that the die is not too big or sitting on a body line, which could help in breaking the die, which is what we're trying to avoid. So let's take a look at a couple key points in removing a rivet. Right now, I have the male end on the gun side and I have the female end on the arm side. These can be switched in any direction that you want, depending upon where the room needs to be or where the head and the form side is of the rivet. So just like we talked about in the beginning, I have my indentation there that fits perfectly over the back side. Try to get that in focus there so you can see that it fits over it. And from here, I'm just going to feather the trigger and I'm going to watch in my little window here for the rivet to come out. If I overextend it, that's where I'm going to run into problems and possibly break the die. So I'm going to start feathering it. You'll see that the elastomer springs start squishing down. You saw the rivet pop out. Now there's no need to go any farther than that. I'm going to use the reverse key. You'll see the elastomer spring pops out and pushes itself off of the panel to make for an easy removal. If you do that every single time, you should never break a die. Let's see it again. I'm going to line it up to the back and then feather it. Once again, watching for my rivet to pop through. Rivet pops through, I hit the release button, and a perfect removal. See it one more time. Line up my backside, feather the trigger, rivet pops out, hit the release key, and now I've removed all three rivets and my panel is ready to come off. So the key point here is making sure that you don't go too fast. Going fast may help in the process of breaking the die because you may get misaligned. So do everything you can to go one by one and do the same repeatable process over and over again, and you'll never have an issue. Now let's take a look at one of the best accessories that you can purchase for your ProSpot PR-5 Rivet Gun, which is the ProSpot PR-PA20 Blind Rivet Adapter. This is a great tool because it meets many of the spec pulling force requirements required by many OEMs for all of their different blind rivets. Many OEMs are moving towards the riveting that we've been talking about today in the webinar. So this tool is going to be something that's going to meet the specs now and moving forward into the future for these different OEMs. So let's take a look at how to go from a regular C-arm attachment to install the blind rivet adapter and show you how easy and how effective the blind rivet adapter is. The first thing that we're going to do is remove the arm from the rivet gun itself. So I'm going to undo the locking nut and slide the existing C-arm off of the rivet gun. I'm going to extend the ram just a little bit and remove any dies that are on the gun still. Once the dies are removed, I'm going to slide the blind rivet adapter over the nose cone, and this spins freely inside to screw the blind rivet adapter onto the front of the nose cone. So this is going to slide on, and I am going to hold the gun so it doesn't fall down. Twist the locking collar. Once it's tightened down, you'll see that the blind rivet adapter spins freely, and this is to make it really easy to get in different areas of the car. So you can get at all different angles, flip it around, and get in tight areas if needed. The other cool thing about the blind rivet adapter is you can tighten the front nose cone in order to hold the rivet inside so that it doesn't fall out once the rivet gun goes upside down. So let's take a look at how the blind rivet adapter works now that we have it installed. I am going back to my demo rocker panel here, and you guys can see that I have some different holes already calibrated in the top. So one of them is going to be the size for the blind rivet hole. So I'm just going to stick my blind rivet into the pre-calibrated hole and stick the blind rivet adapter over it, and I'm going to pull the trigger until the process is complete. You'll hear the stem pop off, lift it up, and now the blind rivet is pulled. Hit the release trigger, and that will release the stem nice and easily out of the tool itself. The last thing that we want to take a look at today to wrap up today's webinar is giving you an example of how to change from the regular standard 85mm C-arm to the larger 240 arm. This is one of the most popular questions that we have come in, and we will be making this into a YouTube video, so stay posted for that. We'll have that coming soon. But the first thing that we need to do is remove the old C-arm that we want to take off, which is as simple as removing the locking collar, sliding the old C-arm off. And then we need to make sure that we hold the gun up, otherwise it will tip backwards. So make sure that you hold the gun so it doesn't fall. The new C-arm is going to slide directly onto the nose cone itself, just like the old arm did. You can lean the gun back, and this will help prop it up to take some of the weight away from it. Once the arm is installed, you're going to retighten down the locking nut. Make sure that this is tight and snug, and then also tighten down the set screws to make sure that you don't have any unwanted pressure onto the threads themselves. Once the arm is on, you will need to locate the two extensions that need to be added on in conjunction, which is the PR-5 65mm extension and the PR-5 50mm extension. So for this, we're going to show you guys how to install these. We're going to screw the 65mm extension onto the gun side, although these can be swapped around depending upon where the access is needed on the vehicle or the repair itself. I'm then going to take the 50mm extension and my threaded insert. Use a screwdriver to hold the threaded insert in place, and then thread my 50mm extension in. Once I have both extensions on, all I need to do is choose my die set, and I'm ready to go. So if I was going to set a solid rivet, for example, I'm going to put my PR-41 and my PR-40 onto the rivet gun. Once again, it does not matter which side these dies actually thread onto. Sorry about that. It does not matter, once again, which side these dies actually thread onto. Once all the dies are tight, just want to make sure that everything is lined up, which it is. And now we're ready to use the large arm attachment.
All right, everybody, welcome back. So hopefully after watching the live part of the PR-5 riveting webinar, hopefully you guys cleared up some of the questions and maybe helped with some of the tips and tricks that maybe you've been struggling with in the past, and answered some of the past questions that have come up during an actual repair. And if we didn't answer all your questions and you still have something that you would like me to go more in depth on, please send an email to the email up there on your screen, training@prospot.com, and we will get that email and I will answer you directly. And if it's something that is actually a great topic, maybe it's something that I can do more in depth moving forward on a future webinar, or actually do a YouTube video that we can post on YouTube. I also want to let you guys know that YouTube, for us, we have a great YouTube channel that we're constantly updating. And as far as the riveting process goes, we actually do pretty good on the riveting side. So any individual process that you have questions on, check out our YouTube page because it's probably already on there, posted to give you guys a better visual. And if not, send that on over to training@prospot.com and we will make it for you because our goal is to make all of you better and your lives easier so the collision repair industry can prosper moving forward into the future. So thank you very much for attending. Please look out for future postings, for future webinars that we're going to have coming up. And, once again, any questions, please send them my way. I'd be happy to answer them. Have a great afternoon, everybody.